Well, the man known as Montreal's Teflon Don is back in Canada. Vito Rizzuto landed at Pearson Airport after doing time in a U.S. prison in connection with a triple murder. Global's Mike Drolet has more on the homecoming of the reputed mob boss.
Over the past century, many different nations have experienced the reach of the Italian Mafia via the rise of their own formidable crime family heads. One such family head's name was whispered in hushed tones while his actions were shrouded in mystery in his day. Yet his name has gone down in history as Canada's most notorious crime lord. This episode unravels the life of Nicolo Rizzuto, the infamous mafia godfather who orchestrated perhaps the greatest criminal empire in Canadian history. We will shed light on the gripping tale of his immigrant journey, his marriage to the mob, and the dark depths of his criminal empire. We'll explore the demons he fought in his personal life, the sacrifices he made, and the price he had to pay for his unwavering authority during his infamous reign. You all might be familiar with the renowned Five Families of New York City, or La Cosa Nostra, the Sicilian-based American mafia groups on which most Hollywood films are based. These families are responsible for producing infamous mob leaders like Joseph Profaci, John Gotti, Carlo Gambino, and Charles Luciano. What you possibly don't know and may be surprised about, however, is that Nicolo and the Rizzuto family outperformed all of them in terms of people, power, and money. Stay tuned as today's bite-sized episode shines the spotlight on this mysterious figure and his iron command that inspired both fear and loyalty as we look at Canada's notorious mob boss, Nick Rizzuto. Nicolo Rizzuto served as the patriarch of both the criminal gang that bears his name and the Rizzuto family. He was born in NSTLKIA in Sicily, Italy on February 18, 1924 to Vito Rizzuto Sr. and Maria Renda. To send money back to his family, Vito Sr. left his wife and the child in Sicily in the late 1920s and traveled to America. He immediately got involved in the criminal underworld in New York State, again highlighting the fact that crime ran in many mob families. When Vito Sr. disappeared outside of Paterson, New York in 1933, Nicolo was brought up by his mother and later a stepfather, Liborio Miliotto. At age 22, he married Libertina Mano, the daughter of a local mafia boss, Antonio Mano. Their child, Vito Jr., born a year later, would go on to play a major role in the mob business. Nicolo and his family packed their belongings and departed Sicily for Montreal in 1954. At the time, he already had a position set up with the Montreal Mafia, which was then led by Vincenzo Vic Cotroni. The family first landed at Pier 21 in Halifax, Nova Scotia, then continued to Montreal, Quebec. Through his marriage, Rizzuto developed ties to the mob, eventually uniting with the Sicilian branch of the Calabrian Cotroni crime family, which at the time exercised substantial control over the criminal activity in Montreal. The foundation for Rizzuto's future involvement in organized crime was built on the foundations of these early affiliations. The world of crime was not unfamiliar to Nicolo. As mentioned, his wife, Libertina Mano, was the daughter of a Sicilian mafioso named Antonio Mano. This relationship paved the way for Nicolo to build connections with other Sicilian crime groups, along with the Cotronis, who controlled most of the 1970s Canadian drug trade and answered to the Bonanno family in New York. Nicolo's father-in-law's connections also helped him to separate from the Cotroni family, whose leadership he frequently disagreed with, in order to build his own crew and alliances, resulting in criminal ties to the United States, Italy, Venezuela, and of course, Canada. The Cotroni family's standing in Montreal's underworld grew throughout the 1950s and 1960s. However, conditions deteriorated during the 70s. The family's patriarch, Cotroni, was weakened by cancer at this time, and Nicolo and a Calabrian named Paolo Violi were the two men most likely to succeed him as the leader. However, both were rivals who desperately wanted to eliminate each other. Violi eventually came into power, and tensions between the Calabrians and the Sicilians intensified. Nicolo began working independently, leaving Violi extremely frustrated. This frustration was depicted in his interview in 1976, where he lamented, "He's going from one side to the other, here and there. He says nothing to nobody, he's doing business, and nobody knows anything." To subside the threat of war that was about to erupt between the two families, the Bonanno family, one of New York's most influential criminal families, also with roots in Sicily, sent a team of mediators to try and settle the ongoing issues between Nicolo and the Catroni family. The Bonannos soon realized that compromise was impossible and sided with the Rizzutos. Ultimately, a mafia conflict broke out between the two families during the late 1970s. As a result, the Catroni family started to disintegrate, with the first significant casualty being Pietro Sciacra, Paolo's consigliere or advisor, ironically gunned down as he left the theater after watching The Godfather 2. Nicolo then adopted the offensive mode and went on a killing spree. The number of men connected to Paolo were quickly reduced, with Paolo's death being the last nail in the coffin. Violas's death was perfectly orchestrated by Nicolo. His demise occurred after he consented to participate in a card game at an ice cream shop where he had connections. Shortly after he began to play, a man reportedly leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, the mafia kiss of death. He was shot twice in the back of the head point blank by a masked shooter an instant later, taking his life at 46. It was precisely at this moment that Rizzuto took control. The Calabrians were wiped out by the 1980s thanks to Nicolo. He further cemented his place as the head of Montreal's top crime family when Paolo's only surviving brother, Rocco, was assassinated by a sniper during the family meal in 1980. Although Nicolo was not directly implicated in these murders, the incidents allowed the Rizzuto family to become Montreal's foremost criminal enterprise. Throughout the mob battle, Nicolo made calculated decisions and formed alliances, strengthening his status as a critical player in the Montreal Mafia. After the mob conflict ended, Nicolo took over the Montreal crime family and directed it into successful illegal business ventures. He kept connections with those involved in crime in Canada, the US, Venezuela, and Italy. At that time, his power knew no limits. The growth and dominance of the Rizzuto family were a direct result of Nicolo's leadership and his capacity to bring diverse groups under his control. When the mob war ended, Nicolo was based in Venezuela. It was evident that he was linked with the murder cases of Paolo. However, the murder also involved Domenico Mano, Antonio Mano's son. After pleading guilty to planning to kill Violi, Mano received a 7-year prison sentence. In the 1980s, after returning to Canada, Rizzuto moved to Montreal's Guay Boulevard and turned it into a mafia stronghold. The region developed into a sanctuary for many organized crime figures, including his own son Vito Jr., who is now part of the family in every way. And Rizzuto's influence went beyond criminal activity to affect regional politics and local businesses. Rizzuto also formed partnerships with the Contera Caruana Mafia family, enhancing the strength and influence of his criminal organization. Rizzuto's involvement in illicit activities, particularly drug trafficking, drew the attention of law enforcement agencies. He was detained in Venezuela in 1988 on drug-related allegations and imprisoned there for 8 years. He was subsequently released after 5 to return home to Canada, officially due to ill health. Unofficially, the $800,000 bribe his family paid to Venezuelan officials might have helped. In 2006, Rizzuto re-encountered legal issues after being found guilty of tax evasion and served a 2-year sentence. The Rizzuto crime family's stability was hampered by these run-ins with the law, which resulted in internal power struggles and violent incidents. On a fateful Wednesday in the late afternoon of November 10, 2010, the shocking news of Nicolo Rizzuto's passing at 86 rocked the mafia world. He had spent the last 3 decades creating a strong and prosperous criminal organization. The event happened in Nicolo's lavish Montreal home where he and his wife, Libertino Mano, lived. A shady shooter hid in the woods behind the house, evading security cameras and picking the perfect time to strike as the Rizzutos were cooking dinner with their daughter. The assassin used planned precision to shoot 1 bullet through 2 panes of glass, hitting the mafia boss in the head. Emergency services were alerted, with an ambulance quickly rushing Nicolo to the hospital. However, Despite their best efforts, he was pronounced dead upon arrival. Salvatore Colati, an Italian-Canadian hitman for the Calabrian-based mafia organization 'Ndrangheta, who was suspected by the police of being the assassin who shot Rizzuto, was fatally gunned down on July 12, 2013. According to organized crime specialist James Dubrow, the Rizzuto family's reign as a significant force in Montreal's crime scene ended following the demise of Nicolo. His untimely death indeed sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Nicolo Rizzuto left a lasting legacy as the mafia's dominant patriarch in Montreal, building an unparalleled organized crime network. His death left a void in the criminal landscape as the Rizzuto family held its breath, wondering who would dare to fill his shoes. Nicolo Rizzuto's life, a once powerful mafia leader, is a prime example of this quote. From his modest origins to becoming the head of the Rizzuto criminal empire and Canada's most notorious mob boss, Nicolo's rise in organized crime was characterized by brilliant maneuvers, intelligent connections, and the bloody removal of competitors. Power and achievement, however, frequently come at a high cost. His love of a life with danger led him to meet a fatal end, closing a dark yet powerful chapter in mafia history.